What's up guys, it's Eric from Rare Candy and welcome back to another countdown video here on the channel, and today we are counting down our top 10 Crimson Invasion cards. So we did post a set review a little while ago which gave our early impressions of the set, but now that the set's had a little bit of time to digest, we've had some time to play with some of these cards, felt like we'd actually give you a more concrete list of our top 10 picks. And I gotta admit, this list was a little bit difficult to put together. Crimson Invasion, you know, if I have to be just brutally honest, it's kind of a bad set compared to the other Sun and Moon sets. There weren't a whole lot of super strong picks for this list, I don't think, but nevertheless, we wanted to still put together at least 10 cards that you guys should keep an eye out for from this set. So as usual with these countdown videos, multiple cards of the same name will not be eligible to be listed. So what I mean by that is, for example, you couldn't have Buzzwole GX, the Full Art Buzzwole GX, and the Rainbow Rare Buzzwole GX all appearing on the same list. We're limiting basically only to one rarity of a card, just to avoid, you know, having a list maybe of just 3 or 4 different cards of different rarities, because that wouldn't be too much fun, would it? And also, no reprints of cards that were already in the format prior to the set releasing will be allowed on the list either. So things like Warp Energy, for example, the Secret Rare version won't be able to be listed because it's a reprint of a card that we already have in standard format, so it won't be appearing on here either. So before we go on to the actual list itself, we do have an honorable mention of a card that didn't quite make it into the list, and that is going to be Lusamine. So Lusamine lets you put 2 of any combination of stadiums or supporters from your discard pile back into your hand. So this is an interesting card we did talk about during our set review, but the overall consensus is that between Marcus and myself, we weren't sure where this card really fit in the expanded format. Versus Seeker just kind of outclasses it, so that pretty much means it's only going to be a card that we'll see play in standard format. So how does this really fare in standard? And it's actually a bit better since, you know, in standard we don't really have a reliable way of getting back supporter cards or stadium cards. Unlike the old format, once you've, you know, discarded all of your supporters, there's not really a good way to getting them back unless you're playing something like a Gardevoir GX. To be able to use Twilight GX. But, you know, most other decks don't really have that luxury to getting back their supporters in stadiums once they've discarded them. So in standard format, this can be a half decent effect, but I think the problem with this card overall is that it's just a little bit too slow. You know, most decks want to play a draw supporter every turn, or they want to play something like a Guzma. So I just think a lot of decks will find it hard to actually take the time to play Lusamine. But nevertheless, I do think there are certain exceptions to that. So Lusamine, for example, a deck that might be heavily reliant on a particular stadium card in order to carry out its deck strategy could actually benefit from Lusamine. So in the case of maybe something like an expanded format where you have Skyfield, something like Mega Rayquaza, for example, can't really function without Skyfield being in play. So once all of its Skyfields have been taken out, you don't really have a great way of taking one-hit knockouts with Mega Rayquaza. Similarly, other decks like Trevenant rely on Dimension Valley to be able to attack. So I think in these types of decks where there are stadium cards that are completely integral to the deck strategy, I think Lusamine is a consideration, but I just think right now it's a little too situational when you would actually want to play this card. So that's why it didn't quite crack our top 10 list, but nevertheless it's one to keep an eye out on, and who knows, it might see some use in the future. But coming in at number 10 on the list, we have a new trainer card called Counter Catcher. So you can only play this card if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, and if you do, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. So these types of catcher effects in the past have been very, very powerful. The old Pokemon catcher was so powerful they had to issue an errata and make it a coin flip. So these types of effects have always been, you know, very, very powerful. Guzma is a supporter. You know, it's your only supporter for the turn, and it still sees play because just the effect of choosing what Pokemon is in your opponent's active spot is so, so powerful. Counter Catcher, I do think, has a better chance of popping up in the metagame than previous attempts at this type of catcher effect post-Pokemon Catcher errata. So the reason for that is because there's actually several slow decks that go down prizes first that could potentially make use of it. So I think the big one in format is going to be Greninja. So I think this is probably one of the first decks that will probably come to mind for decks that could potentially use this card, just because in Greninja, for example, you go down prize cards very early on. Usually your opponent is 3 prizes ahead before you can make a big comeback. So Counter Catcher, I could see players testing out in that. Also, you have things like Electrode that knocks itself out, putting you at a prize deficit, allowing you to use Counter Catcher. So in these slow decks like Greninja, or decks that can knock out their own Pokemon and put themselves behind on prizes, Counter Catcher could potentially see some play, but the reason it is so low on the list is because Guzma still does exist. So we've had cards in the past like POW Hand Extension that were similar to Counter Catcher that saw a large amount of play, but those were also in formats where we did not have things like Lysander and Guzma. So I think Guzma might still just overshadow Counter Catcher most of the time, but who knows, maybe like I said, in some of these slower decks, Counter Catcher could start to creep in low counts, maybe to like 1 or 2 copies, and it might make an impact in the game. So we'll have to see, but that is why it's coming in at the number 10 spot. So coming in at number 9, we have what's becoming one of my favorite cards, and that is going to be Gourgeist. This is definitely a card that was not on a lot of people's radar coming into the Crimson Invasion format, but we've actually been posting some videos featuring this card, and it's been starting to get a little bit of attention for its Pumpkin Bomb attack. Before doing damage, you may discard any number of Pokemon tool cards from your Pokemon. This attack does 40 damage for each card you discard in this way. So you can discard a bunch of tools from your Pokemon, hit for large amounts of damage with just a 1 prize attacker. So Gourgeist, right now at the time of filming, the London International Championship has yet to happen. Basically, any major tournaments featuring Crimson Invasion have yet to occur at the time of filming, but who knows, Gourgeist might potentially creep into the metagame. It's definitely been a bit of a sleeper deck. If you have 5 tool cards that you discard, you're going to be hitting for 210 damage with Pumpkin Bomb. Similarly, if you have 6 cards or 6 tool cards to discard, you'll be hitting for 250. So Gourgeist is definitely a very, very powerful attacker, and luckily there's lots of tool cards to make use of. We have things like Choice Band, we have Float Stones, you even have weird things like Muscle Dumbbells. Then you also have, I think more importantly, the Clef Key from Steam Siege that lets itself, as an ability, attach itself as a tool to one of your Pokemon. So that adds another, I think, boost to the deck. You have things like Rescue Stretcher to keep recycling Clef Keys once they've been discarded. So Gourgeist definitely seems like it has some potential, but at the time of filming, like I said, no major tournaments have occurred, so not quite sure how well this will fit into the metagame, but it definitely seems like a good sleeper card, and that's why it's coming in at the number 9 spot. So coming in at the number 8 spot is going to be our first GX of the list. That's going to be a Nihilego GX. It's one of the new Ultra Beasts that came out of Crimson Invasion, and the reason it is placing at number 8 is for this ability called Empty Light. So whenever you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, once during your turn, you may leave both active Pokemon confused and poisoned. So this is a very, very strong ability. There's several cards already in the format that look to potentially abuse this. You have things like Darkrai GX, which can take instant knockout with its Dead End GX move. You have Alolan Muck GX, which can do additional damage for every status condition on your opponent's active Pokemon. And then there's even more weird stuff like Eradicate Break, for example, which is still in the format. For a DCE, after playing Nihilego, you can take basically an instant knockout thanks from the poison from Empty Light. So this ability definitely looks like it has a good bit of use. Even outside of these kind of gimmicky decks like this, if you just have a deck that has consistent ways to retreat out of the active spot to get out of this, status condition, Nihilego definitely could be splashable there. It also has a very interesting GX move called Symbiont GX. For 3 Psychic Energy, add the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck to their prize cards. So this is actually a pretty crazy GX move. If not for the awkward energy cost that it requires, this would actually be, I think, one of the best GX moves in the game. And the reason it is so low on this list, though, is because it does not have a reliable way to power itself up. So that's the big reason. So maybe in the future, if we get some consistent psychic energy acceleration, that makes this card easier to power up, or maybe some more cards that could benefit from these status conditions. Who knows, Nihilego might see an uptick in play, but for the moment it's going to come at the number 8 spot. Definitely an impressive card, but one that still looks to have its full potential unlocked. Coming in at number 7, we have Miltank. So Miltank is a basic from Crimson Invasion, and we're looking at for its Moo Malt ability. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, whenever you attach an energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon, heal 90 damage from that Pokemon. So this is basically good in any deck that has reliable ways to attach energy from hand, and also has a decent amount of outs to retreating. The most obvious combo people have been kind of talking about is with Gardevoir GX. So with Gardevoir GX, with its Secret Spring ability, you can attach additional energies for turn, meaning that if you attach once for turn, as long as Miltank is your active Pokemon, and then also use Secret Spring, you can heal 180, which is totally crazy. If your opponent can't knock out your Gardevoir, for example, you can just promote this Miltank and heal off all your damage. So then you also have things like the Magnezone that we still have in format that lets you attach as many lightning energies as you want per turn. You could potentially heal off all of the damage from one of your Pokemon. I wouldn't imagine it would take more than 3 energy attachments to make something like that happen, potentially. So this is definitely a pretty impressive ability. The only downside to Miltank is that it has a pesky 2 retreat cost and has to be your active Pokemon. So who knows, you might have to run things like Silvally GX to give your basic Pokemon free retreat, or maybe it could be good in decks with a high Guzma count, or maybe a deck that has lots of free retreat options, maybe like if you're playing Altar of the Moon or something like that. So Miltank, it has some obstacles to overcome, but if you can make this ability work and you have lots of big tanky attackers, you'd have to imagine unless they're getting knocked out in one hit, they will be staying alive thanks to this card. So that's Miltank, and that's why it's coming in at number 7. So up next, we have our only supporter to be making our top 10 list, and that is going to be Gladion. So Gladion's new supporter. Look at your face down prize cards and put one of them into your hand, then shuffle this Gladion into your remaining prize cards and put them back face down. If you didn't play this Gladion from your hand, it does nothing. So basically this is going to be a way to fish things out of your prize cards. And, that might seem kind of, mediocre, I guess, since it is your supporter for turn. But just think, how many games have you played where you're just like, man, if only this one card that I needed wasn't prized, I could have won. Or especially in the case of things like Greninja, where if you prize more than one Frogadier, you can kind of be in bad shape. So Gladion is definitely very good in these decks like Greninja, or maybe like the old Gyarados, where you can't really afford to prize any of one specific card for your deck strategy to actually function correctly. So I think Gladion has some potential in decks like that. They might prefer it over Town Map just because it is a little bit more proactive, since you're actually getting a card out of your prizes as opposed to just being able to look at them. Because a lot of times if you play Town Map, you might be able to see what you have prized, but if you can't even set up to take prizes, Gladion could definitely outshine Town Map in those situations. Also, after your initial search, let's say you Ultra Ball in the first turn to grab a Bridget or something like that, you can pretty much figure out what you have prized after that. So let's say you have just like a double colorless energy prized, or like a Field Blower, or just some random card that you might need to complete your strategy for the turn. If you know what's in your prizes, you can just go for a Lele, for a Gladion, and then dig out exactly what you need. So in a way, it's kind of like a computer search in those types of situations, where it can basically get you any specific card that you need that's in your prizes. So I think that's also a powerful effect, but basically it's also good for any text that you might be running. How many times have you played maybe a Giratina promo or Mr. Mime or whatever it might be to counter one specific matchup, and then it's prized and you don't have a way to actually counter that matchup and you might lose. Gladion can help you dig those out of the prizes to stay in the game. So we'll have to see if Gladion does make an impact on the game, but it does look like it gives us a reliable way of fishing prize cards out of our prizes. Next up, we have the only Regi to make the list. All of the new Regis, we're including Crimson Invasion, but I think Registeel is far and above the best one to come out of the set. So we have Registeel. It's a 130 hit point metal type basic Pokemon. The main reason it has landed on this list is for its first attack, Turbo Arm, for a metal energy. It does 30 damage, and attach a basic energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. So this is essentially like a metal version of Yveltal, or like the Raikou that came out of Shining Legends, but it's actually a little better because you can accelerate any type of energy. but most of the time, if you're playing Registeel, you're probably playing Metal Energy. But at least it does give you the extra flexibility if you did want to run some sort of multi-type deck. But then it also has another attack, Iron Hand, for 2 Metal Energy, and a colorless does 90. And if Regist is on your bench, heal 30 damage from this Pokemon. But like I said, the main reason Registeel has climbed this high on the list is going to be for Turbo Arm. But you might be thinking, well, what decks really would want to play this? That's the question. So we've posted a few on the channel at this point trying out Registeel. We actually have an entire Regi-based deck with all of the Regis in it. Registeel can kind of act as your early game attacker to flood energy onto your board to set up things like a Regigigas or other attackers you might have. I think it also has some good synergy with the metal variant of Silvally GX. You know, in the early game, while you're still evolving into your Silvallis, and getting your other attackers online, you can start accelerating some energy pretty quickly with this guy, setting up knockouts with that 30 damage. But also the typing on Registeel is just so great. 2 of the most popular Pokemon in the format are weak to Registeel. That's going to be Alolan Vulpix and Ralts. So Gardevoir GX, definitely one of the best decks in the format, if not the best deck. So you can definitely expect to see lots of Gardevoir at the time of filming. So that means for just a single energy, you can knock out their low HP evolving basics. Also, Alolan Vulpix, like I mentioned too, is popped up even in decks that don't run Ninetales. So it's probably the most common starter Pokemon, I guess you could say, that's in the format. So you have things like Metagross that run it, Gardevoir sometimes runs it, Alolan Ninetales obviously runs it. So it's just a card that you can expect to see pop up in a number of decks that Registeel should be able to easily be able to pick off. So, and also if you just look historically at the Yveltal back from the XY set, it's basically seen play ever since it was released. You know, Dark has kind of dropped off recently, but nevertheless, in the past, what was that 2013 when XY came out, 2014? In the past like 3 years, it's basically seen steady play. So I definitely think that hints that Registeel might similarly see a decent amount of play, and that's why it's climbed so far up onto the number 5 spot. Next up at number 4, we have finally yet another GX. We have Kartana GX, yet another Ultra Beast too. So Kartana GX is a 170 hit point basic GX, and it has this ability Slice Off. Whenever you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, during your turn, you may discard a special energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. It also has an attack called Gale Blade for a Metal and DCE to 70 damage, and you may shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it back into your deck. And then it also has Blade GX for just a single Metal energy, take a prize card. So wow, the GX move on this card is fantastic just to kick it off with. If you're playing Metal Energy and you're not something like Solgaleo GX, Kartana I definitely think should be a consideration at the least. If you don't already have a better GX move to take advantage of, this definitely will have, I think find its way into a number of decks just for the GX move alone. But its ability, I think, is the other thing that really makes this card so interesting. It's essentially an enhanced hammer whenever you bench Kartana. That means you can Ultra Ball for an enhanced hammer, which is kind of cool, actually. And there's a number of decks in the current format that play special energy. You have things like Gardevoir, Greninja, Golisopod, Garbodor variants. So double colorless energy in particular is basically everywhere in the current format. So there's definitely plenty of opportunities to make use of this ability. But just a combination of the ability and the GX move is really what makes Kartana so good. I don't think you build an entire deck around this card just because as an attacker it's not the greatest. It takes 3 energy to do 70 and you have to shuffle Kartana back into the deck. Now, of course, the upside to that is that it does give you a chance to reuse Slice Off after you've already benched it once. So there is a little bit of synergy there, but it's just too weak, I think, to base the entire deck around this. But like I said, if you're a metal deck, maybe in the case of Metagross, for example, or maybe one of the metal Silvally GX variants, I think Kartana is definitely a consideration for these different decks. And also there's a decent amount of decks in the current format that run Rainbow Energy, which means they will be able to easily splash Kartana into their list. So the most common ones I think right now are probably going to be Golisopod Garbodor, basically Garbodor in general, Drampagarb, and the new Buzzwole, assuming that it does see play with the Trashalanche Garbodor. So I think 3 decks right there alone that play Rainbow Energy that look to be able to abuse this GX move. So definitely, a very, very powerful card. Definitely excited to see how this will slip into the metagame, but that is why it has climbed so far up at the number 4 spot. Coming in at number 3, we have a new special energy card, and that is going to be Counter Energy. So it provides one single colorless energy, and if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, and if this card is attached to a Pokemon that isn't a GX or EX, this card provides every type of energy but only 2 at the same time. So what that means is if you are losing, you basically have a double rainbow energy for non-GXs and EXs, which is a very, very powerful effect. We've had things in the past like double rainbow energy. We've even had scramble energy, which is pretty similar to counter energy. It's kind of like a hybrid of both of those cards in a way. Which both used to see plenty of play when they were legal. So I'm expecting Counter Energy to do the same just because of the precedent that the history of the game has set for us. So, but there's still a number of cards in the current format that can abuse this, but I think the most notable one is going to be the Cobalion from Steam Siege. For just 2 metal energy or just 1 counter energy, you can do more damage based on the amount of prize cards your opponent has taken. So, like I said, I think that's the most obvious combo here. Counter energy really only works when you're losing. Cobalion really only works whenever your opponent is very close to winning. So I think there's a lot of synergy there, but I'm just really excited overall to see what kind of creativity this is going to promote in the game. I'm expecting, I don't have many specific decks that I'm expecting to really pop up and do well at the time of filming, but I just feel like the amount of potential in this card is too high for it to come any lower on the list than at the number 3 spot. So definitely a card I think to look out for. And are there any cards you guys are actually thinking that could potentially combo well with Counter Energy? Let us know below in the comments too. Alright guys, we're on the home stretch. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we have Silvally GX. Our first non-Ultra Beast GX of the list so far. So Silvally GX, myself and Marcus did say we were pretty excited for it back in our set review, and that's actually for a couple reasons. So it's a 210 hit point stage 1 GX, pretty standard stuff there, but it has this ability called Gyro Unit. Your basic Pokemon in play have no retreat cost, so a very, very powerful ability right off the bat. Having no retreat cost is it's definitely a simple effect, but definitely one I don't think you should overlook the power of. In the past we've had things like Darkrai GX with its Dark Cloak ability. We've seen, decks run that card literally just for the ability in some cases. We've had the Manaphy EX with its Aqua Tube ability. We have Altar of the Moon, which is currently in the format. Giving free retreat to Pokemon is definitely a good thing. That's why a lot of decks in the current format play 3 to 4 copies of Floatstone. So just the ability alone, I think, makes Silvally such a contender from this set. But its first attack, Turbo Drive, for 3 colorless energy does 120 damage, and you attach a basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. So this is especially good, even though it is kind of an average amount of damage. It's great because you are a colorless attacker, which means you can play any type of energy and have energy acceleration for any type. So as the format continues, as cards get rotated, if there's a certain type that you want energy acceleration for, but doesn't have a great way to do that, then maybe Silvally GX might be an option for you. And because it is a colorless attacker, it only basically has to attack for 2 attachments, a double colorless and 1 other energy. And so 120 damage, like I said, it's kind of like a mediocre amount, but you will 2-shot basically every relevant card that is currently in the format. But then it also has a great GX move called Rebel GX or Rebel GX, I'm not sure how you want to pronounce that. But for the same attack cost, it does 50 times the amount of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So this is the same GX move that is on the Midnight form of Lycanroc GX, and definitely can help you take like a big one-hit knockout, since basically every deck in the current format is reliant on having a full bench. So it definitely won't be hard to take a big one-hit knockout with this at some point in the game. And then Silvally also has a number of exclusive tools just for itself, like the new Fighting Memory and Psychic Memory that came out of Crimson Invasion. So Silvally GX is going to be getting these memory cards that will allow you to change its typing to specific types. So if you know, Silvally GX is weak to fighting Pokemon, so maybe if you're expecting to run into a lot of fighting Pokemon, you can play Psychic Memory, make Silvally a psychic type to be able to hit those fighting Pokemon for weakness, since most of the time fighting Pokemon are typically weak to psychic. So yeah, Silvally has a lot of its own unique tools, and there's more types of these memories that will be released in coming sets as well. But then Silvally also has a number of decent partners in the current format. I think the metal variant is probably the most popular at the time of filming. So you can play Silvally with things like the new Registeel we just mentioned earlier, maybe the Gladion from Steam Siege, Scizor EX, Kartana GX, basically like a big metal toolbox, something like that. But definitely a lot of flexibility with this card, and it's one I expect players to definitely come up with some creative things for in the future. Alright guys, the moment you've been waiting for, the number one card out of Crimson Invasion we are choosing is going to be Buzzwole GX. I think most people probably saw this one coming, just since Crimson Invasion honestly didn't have a whole lot of top tier cards to really add to the mix. I think the top few on this list were somewhat predictable, but if the card's good, we have to give credit where it's due. So Buzzwole GX, our number one pick for Crimson Invasion. And so let's look at this card. 190 hit points on a basic GX, which is already a solid amount of HP. But the main reason we are looking at this card is going to be for Jet Punch. It might seem really weird, but just for a single fighting energy, you do 30 damage and put 30 damage on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So again, you guys might be thinking, well, Registeel does 30 damage for one energy as well. Like, why is this such a big deal? And the reason for that is because the current format is just so reliant on evolving basics. So 68 HP Pokemon like Ralts, like Alolan Vulpix, like Beldums, etc. are very easy to be able to be picked off by this attack Jet Punch. It just puts on an insane amount of pressure. So in conjunction with things like Potown and Espeon EX, you have plenty of ways to either knock out these low HP evolving basics or de-evolve them to take knockouts once you have enough damage on them. But let's take a look at the rest of the card. Also has an attack called Knuckle Impact for 3 fighting and does 160, and it can't attack during your next turn. Also has Absorption GX for 3 fighting energy, 40 times the amount of prize cards that you have remaining. So these attacks are definitely solid as well. They are a little bit more awkward to power up. I think in most cases, without Max Elixir, these are going to be kind of difficult to stream throughout the course of a game. But like I said, the main reason we are looking at this card is going to be for Jet Punch. Then you also have things like Choice Band to factor in as well. So let's say your opponent does have a Gardevoir GX, for example. You can do Jet Punch with a Choice Band to do 60, 30 to one of their bench Pokemon, and guess what? That Gardevoir, if they rare candied into it, is already set up to be de-evolved with Espeon EX. And then fighting Pokemon already have their own support. They have things like Strong Energy to, increase their damage even more. There's even the old Regirock back from, I believe it's Fates Collide at this point, which will increase the damage of fighting Pokemon as well. So Buzzwole just has a tremendous amount of support, and it just looks like it will have a way to capitalize and take advantage of how setup based this current format is. If you notice, it also doesn't have any abilities, so you can actually play things like the Garbotox and Garbodor to shut off abilities for all Pokemon in play. There's also, I've seen people talking about playing things like Silvally GX with it. So Buzzwole definitely been seeing a ton of hype for pretty good reason, I have to say. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, no major tournaments featuring Crimson Invasion have come out yet, so it's hard to say what the impact of this card will be just yet, but I would be very surprised if this card did not see play in some capacity. It's just, I feel like, too strong not to see some play. So that's why Buzzwole is going to take the entire list, coming in at the number 1 spot. And I'm sure you guys out there, you have your own opinions of this set. So definitely let us know too, like, did we miss any cards? Do you think we were too generous? Ranked some cards too high or too low? Definitely sound off in the comment section and let us know what you guys think. But as usual, guys, feel free to like and subscribe, and a big shout out to all of our supporters over on patreon.com/rarecandytcg. If you guys can support us over there or by picking up something from our online store at rarecandytcg.com, it would be greatly appreciated. But with that, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you for the next one.